If you're an airline, how would you react if I were to tell you that from October 2015, you could be losing millions of dollars in fraudulent credit card transactions? Why this date in particular? Because that's the date the banks have decided to change the rules on liability. If this time next year your passengers are still swiping their credit cards along that little slot under the TV screens to order their sandwiches, their snacks and their soda, you could be in for a rude and very expensive awakening. Here to explain what's happening and what you can do about it, please welcome my special guest here on the PME interview, Mr. Michael Planey from HMPlaney Consultants. Michael, welcome to the program today. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, today, we're going to be talking about the humble credit card, something most of us own, and it's a pretty essential piece of kit, particularly if you want to buy anything on board the aircraft. Now, that might be a sandwich or a soda, or it might be something more expensive, like duty-free, a $300 watch. So what's changing, and why should the airlines be concerned?
Well, what's changing is the standard of what a credit card is made out of and how that credit card is read. Right now, on the back of most credit cards in the United States, you have a magnetic stripe that you run through a reader and you swipe through once very quickly, and it contains all of your data. It's a single authentication credit card. What's going to change is that in October 2015, most US banks, credit unions, and other institutions will be issuing a two-part authentication card. We call that chip and pin. So each of your cards will have a small microchip in the card.
Like this one here.
And you'll be able to embed that card into a terminal, and then you have to put a second authentication piece in, that's your PIN number. And when you do that, it guarantees not only do you have a physical card present, but you are the owner of that card. The idea here is to reduce the amount of fraudulent transactions. So in October of 2015, the big deadline is, or the big change is in who is responsible and liable for fraudulent transactions.
What's the situation at present?
Right now, for the majority of card-present transactions, the issuer bears the liability. So the bank that gave you your credit card assumes the majority of the liability. After the October 2015 deadline happens, if the chip and pin technology is available, and if it would have prevented a fraudulent transaction from happening, then the merchant, or the airline in our particular case, is responsible for the liability. So suddenly you go from the bank holding the bag to the airline holding the bag.
Right.
And that's why this becomes a big issue for the airline.
So let's get this straight. Right now, if I have a mind, I can use my credit card on board an aircraft with the magnetic stripe to buy an expensive piece of kit, maybe a watch or a piece of jewelry, walk off the plane, and if it's fraudulent, the bank bears responsibility. But what you're saying is that from October 2015, it's the airline that's going to take the hit. Is that correct?
It is if they do not have chip and pin credit card technology on board.
Now, why is this a problem for airlines?
The biggest reason is because the cost of changing out an embedded credit card reader that is part of an IFE system in the seat back is exorbitant. It's a small part of the overall system, but the cost to recertify the system or to change it out with new hardware far outweighs the value to the airline. But it does mean that the airline is going to start seeing charges that they did not see before. The question is, do you pay a little bit in terms of your liability, or do you pay a lot in terms of changing out all of the hardware?
But now hang on here. Most of the swipe slots you see in the screens in the back of the seat, you're not going to use those to buy anything expensive. You're going to use those to buy a sandwich or a soda. The expensive items are normally a transaction between yourself and a member of the cabin crew, and they've got a little handheld unit. Now that will surely have a pin and chip.
Yeah, it's much easier to change out a portable device. You don't have to go through the same certification issue.
Right.
The big issue is there are, by some estimates, 200,000 or 300,000 seats that have embedded IFE with a credit card strip in them, and you don't want to turn the transactions off The airlines want the revenue because if 99.5% of the transactions are valid, that's a very good revenue stream. Large dollar transactions, duty-free merchandise that's delivered afterwards, services for hotel rooms and everything else, that can be handled separately, either with a portable device or 2 or 3 years down the road when the new chip and PIN standards are enabled and there's technology that's embedded in the seat back to make it possible.
But are there any quick fix solutions right now?
No. That's why we are raising the awareness with the airlines in particular. There are some companies, Panasonic being one, has said that they are committed to putting NFC, near field communications, which are the Apple Pay, Google Wallet type of payment solutions on board. But even if they were to release it today, for the majority of airlines, you wouldn't have them installed on an aircraft by the time the deadline passes for the liability change. The easiest thing to do is to re-equip your flight attendants with chip and PIN devices when it happens. And you do that after the majority of American banks have issued chip and PIN cards to their customers.
Now, I live in the UK, and in Europe we've had chip and PIN for 20 years, and we're all very used to it. In fact, you wouldn't think twice about putting in your PIN number when you make a purchase. Why has it taken so long for this technology to reach the USA?
Generally speaking, it's cost and it's the size of the market. When it comes to purchasing credit card terminals, new credit card terminals, you, as the merchant, bear much of the cost of that. So a small business, it might be $500 to buy a new terminal to put on the checkout stand. Large businesses multiply that by 1,000 or 10,000 and the costs add up very quickly. You also have to change a little bit your back office practices, change your software and your processing a little bit. What's really forced the issue now is that, as you say, in the UK and in the EU and in parts of Asia, where chip and PIN has been the norm for as many as 10 years, you're seeing the rates of card-present fraud drop by 95%. So in the US, where you can get by with card-present fraud, the numbers actually went up about 300% from when it shifted over. So now the costs of the fraud are so high to the industry overall, it's economical to force people to change to chip and PIN.
But this is going to be a huge issue here in the United States.
Absolutely.
How are other industries reacting?
The vast majority of them have known that this is coming for a couple of years and have been planning to make this happen. A good example is when you see the large-scale fraud that's hit some of the big retailers. Their systems have been hacked, but in some cases they've been hacked through the credit card terminals themselves. Suddenly that is a weak point in their whole payment processing system. It's worth it to them to make this change. There are some industries, however, who have received an extension on this deadline. The most notable one are, I believe they call them embedded fuel dispensers. So the gas stations around the world, if you think of a normal gas station, you may have 10 or 12 pumps, each with its own credit card reader. The fuel dispensers they've had a change for up to 2 years. I believe it's October of 2017 before they have to have all of their terminals enabled with chip and PIN. The airlines now are in the process, through Apex, of putting together a formal request for an extension of the liability deadline so that they are not affected in October of 2015, but it applies only to the embedded credit card readers installed on the aircraft. It won't apply to things like kiosks. It won't apply to how they process things at the gate at the airport or in the check-in counter or anything else. As we understand it, they'll still be liable then. It's only for the embedded readers on board the aircraft.
For airlines listening to you talking now, Michael, for whom alarm bells are beginning to ring here, there and everywhere, what can they do? How can they make their voice heard? Is it through Apex?
I think that's really the best choice. In this particular case, Apex has aligned itself with a group called A4A, Airlines for America, which is the largest airline trade organization here in the States. They are used to dealing with the government. They are used to dealing with large industries, and in particular, the credit card industry. They have already put together an ongoing credit panel that deals with all of the issues related to air travel in particular with the credit card issuers and the banks. We have addressed this issue with the A4A credit panel. We've made our initial contacts with all of the major EMVCo companies, and EMVCo is a consortium of credit card issuers that are determining the standards for chip and PIN. So we've contacted them initially, and we're about to start the process of formally applying for the waiver.
People listening to us now talking, where can they get more information from?
I think the best thing is to query Apex and look for the resources we're going to start to make available to them. We've committed, once this working group is actually officially ratified and the leadership structure is determined, we will start having monthly communications about this. We have put some homework out there for the airlines themselves, mainly that they need to come to an internal conclusion about how they want to approach this. The marketing people who are in charge of in-flight entertainment may have a different idea than the treasury people who process all the credit cards. So we want them to come to a consensus within their own airline and then provide us a written letter that says, here's what we want to do. Our opinion right now through Apex is that everybody wants this extension for 2 years. It does not have to be unanimous. If we have a large majority of them who want this, then we can begin the process of applying for the Apex members.
And are you happy to take questions yourself?
Absolutely. Anyone can contact me either via phone or via email. Our website is HMPlaney.com. You can always go there and submit an email, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Michael, it's been a very interesting 10 minutes with you. I've enjoyed it. I think a lot of airlines out there are going to find this information very, very valuable indeed. So appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Coming up, Steve Harvey brings you another informative and interesting interview with a leading professional from the ranks of our in-flight entertainment industry. Don't miss it. That's next time on the PME Interview.